this is our either 6th or 7th year participating in Safe Plus Sound Week. We really love it. We look forward to it every year. But this is my particular favorite thing to give a presentation on. So I work for OHD. I'm the Senior Technology and Research Manager here at OHD, and we manufacture and sell respirator fit testing equipment. But I'm also the president of the International Society for Respiratory Protection, and respiratory protection is really close to my heart. So this is something I'm passionate about, and hopefully that shows as we go through the presentation. And while Laura said I would be happy to answer your questions, it depends on the question, but I will do my best, and hopefully I am happy to there for you. Okay. Let's start off with some foundational information. So first off, why are we going to do a respirator fit test? If you're here, then I'm going to have to assume that you care about protecting the health of your employees. Well, respirator fit testing, if your people are exposed to inhalation hazards, then it's very likely that respiratory protection is something that you're having to use on a regular basis to protect them. Respirator fit testing is going to help give that employee some peace of mind about their protection. I mean, going through that fit test, that can really, you get, especially if you're doing quantitative fit testing, you're going to be able to get that number to then look at and go, okay, wow, like I can see the difference. With CNC fit testing, you're going to be able to look and see the difference between the ambient particle count and what count you're getting inside the mask. That can help reinforce, that your mask is doing what it's supposed to do. And then with CMP testing, you can get an actual leak rate, and you're going to be able to see, okay, wow, that that really is, doing some good there, right? So I can help give your employees some confidence in their protection. But unfortunately, one of the main reasons that people perform fit testing is because they are regulated to do so. And we see this globally. Every country that implements a regulation for fit testing, which is more and more countries, we immediately see a drive to start actually performing fit testing. So while I do believe that probably everyone here is motivated to protect the health of their employees, we do know that regulation helps really get it going. And I don't think that's necessarily like all out of terrible motivation. I think a lot of it is education, and then I do think that some of it is just really, also a function of education, but not understanding, right? Like you want to do the right thing, and you're giving your employees respirators. You just don't recognize that there's all this stuff that really goes into that. So just to emphasize the part of regulation, here in the States with OSHA, respiratory protection is consistently in the top 10 citations. And we're living in a post-COVID world, so I don't think there's anything to suggest that this is going to go in the opposite direction. But the amount of violations pretty much stays the same, and where it places just kind of depends on what other things get emphasis. But respiratory protection, always really high up on the list. And one of the biggest things that you actually see get cited is just not doing something. So whether it's not doing your medical evaluations, not performing fit testing, not documenting everything. Obviously, OSHA is going to require you to have documentation of everything that you've done. And if you don't, then you might as well have not done it. So it's really important for regulatory purposes to make sure that you write down. This is just what a respiratory protection program requires per OSHA. And it's honestly a little bit funny seeing it just listed so simply. This is not an easy undertaking. I mentioned that we're in a post-COVID world where during COVID, we had several customers call and kind of say, hey, can't we just put our guys in respirators to protect them from COVID, and then they can come back to work? And you go, oh Lord, no, you can't you can't do that, because, and that's actually twofold. Number one, if you give your guys respirators, then you have to implement a respiratory protection program. So that's all of these items. But number two, if you were to give your employees respirators to protect them from COVID, then you're acknowledging COVID, which was a global pandemic, as an occupational hazard. That's a whole nother side of like legal liability that I think they're still trying to iron out as far as from a regulatory perspective. So what is fundamentally a respirator fit test? So when we perform a respirator fit test, we're going to use an approved protocol that's going to evaluate the fit of a specific respirator on a specific person. So it's going to make sure that you're getting a make, model, style, and size that suits your face. It's also going to do a lot to verify training. When you come in for your respirator fit test, a good fit test administrator is going to check with you to make sure that you understand how to use your respirator, how to don it appropriately, that you understand what you're using it against. Those are all things that can come up in the respirator fit test. Not as much here with OSHA, we'll get into why, but a lot of places where the fit test administrator has to be certified in some way, you're going to see them ask a lot more questions about respirator use and how comfortable the person is with their respirator. That gets us into this. So who can perform a fit test? OSHA is very loose with this. OSHA is pretty much going to say that it's a qualified person, that they have to have some, knowledge of the instrumentation. They need to be able to do a couple things. They list out some items, but it's quite vague. So is it a competent person? Is it a qualified person? Is it your respiratory protection program administrator? Or is it anyone, right? And something that's come up globally to sort of address this is what people are calling either accreditation or qualification schemes. These are just two examples. So ResFit is the qualification scheme out of Australia. And in the interest of full disclosure, I am an assessor for ResFit, so I'm more intimately familiar with that one and its process. And it's a great process. You can actually do it from anywhere globally to get accredited in Australia if you needed that for whatever reason. Or maybe just getting a ResFit certification would benefit you. And you can send in your video to get evaluated by 2 separate assessors in whatever method you're interested in. And then Fit to Fit is a program qualification scheme out of the UK that is sort of pushing through Europe at the moment. There are others. There's Commit to Fit out of New Zealand. And there are other countries in Europe that have decided to establish their own instead of using the Fit to Fit scheme. But this is a big deal globally. And I actually think that eventually we'll see more of this coming up in the US, but as of right now, you don't have to have any sort of certification. You just need to have familiarity with the equipment and show that you know the right stuff to document. Okay, when are we going to perform a fit test? So obviously, in an ideal world, this is going to happen. You're gonna, come into a facility, you're going to know all of your hazards that are present, you're going to know where you need to use respiratory protection, and you're going to select, have several respirators people can choose from. You're going to have every employee as they come into the site get, a respirator that fits them, appropriate for their job. They're going to go through a fit test. So should be part of that initial respirator selection. We don't live in that world. So a lot of times what ends up happening is there is an untested face piece that's already in use that then, either OSHA or someone brings it to the attention of the employer, and that's when the respiratory protection program gets implemented. I am seeing that happen less, which is good, but I do know that it's still a problem. I mean, there's a lot of places that are using respirators that don't have a respiratory protection program, and OSHA doesn't have the means to get to every one of those sites. So that is going to continue to happen, and that's why I think that education is so important, especially with respirator fit testing. So when are we going to perform a repeat test? So we've got that initial test that either happens, before anyone's ever using the respirator, so as they're hired, and then when are we going to do a repeat test, right? So that's if someone loses or gains a quote significant amount of weight. And I did find some resource at some point that said that was plus or minus 20 pounds. I will say, good luck to you if you are the person who has to go up to one of your employees and say, hey, Bill, looks like you put on a solid 20, time for that next repeat test. I don't think that's the best way to go about that. So we mentioned this yesterday, but this is where you have to have a culture of trust with your employees. And that's something that you build from day one. You need to help them understand why the respirator fit test is important, right? And then what things might happen that would initiate a subsequent fit test, and then they bring that to you. And that's how you want this to work. One sort of emerging thing that I've seen more recently is the use of Botox and fillers on the face. So do keep in mind that certain amounts of Botox, or how someone responds to Botox or fillers, can actually make pretty substantial changes in your face. And so essentially, if you are someone who's getting that, again, good luck being the person to go tell someone that, but hopefully they recognize the importance and they come to you and say, hey, I just had this work done. Don't I look amazing? And also, can I get my fit test? Because they're going to recognize the importance. And do not think that that is limited to women. I know that women are a bigger user, but it is becoming more and more common with men. It's also typically at a regulated time interval. Here in the States, that's going to be at least annually. That's pretty typical globally, but there are some that do either 2 or 3 years. I would say there's a lot of actually evidence to show that the annual is quite beneficial, especially if you're someone who's not having to use your respirator on a very regular basis. Okay. With the big umbrella of respirator fit testing, there are 2 overarching types. There's qualitative fit testing, and then there's quantitative fit testing. So with qualitative fit testing, this is where you're relying on the wearer to detect leakage into their respirator, and it's a simple pass-fail test. This is also typically going to be limited to half-mask respirators, and that's because of it's going to have an assigned fit factor of 100. Quantitative, on the other hand, is going to use a machine to measure leakage in some way, and it's going to provide you with an objective number that is, in one way or another, we'll talk about the different ways that it's doing it, quantifying your fit. So providing you with an actual fit factor. And depending on the method you use, it can be used on, there is a quantitative method that can be used on any type of respirator. So qualitative, currently with OSHA, there are 4 different accepted methods. So there's the banana oil, which is going to smell of bananas. There's saccharin, which is going to taste sweet. There's Bitrex, that's going to taste bitter. That's my preference when I do qualitative, because usually you can kind of see the person's reaction, and that helps me. Now, irritant smoke, you're 100% going to see their reaction, but irritant smoke is actually toxic, and so NIOSH recommends against it, and I personally recommend against it. But it is still approved by OSHA, and some people do love to use it because it does cause an actual reaction with the person being tested. That being said, irritant smoke can only be used on P100 and like better. So then, like, I guess different cartridges it might apply to, but you can't use it on your N95 respirators, which we saw during the pandemic. A lot of people wanting to use the irritant smoke to test their N95 respirators. Well, you can't. That's not one of the ones that it's able to test. If you test, so the way that this generally works is you're going to have a hood over your head. You're going to, this is specifically someone doing either saccharin or Bitrex, and you're going to have where someone's got a hood on their head, you're initiate your charging, is what we call it, charging the hood with that substance, and then you're figuring out if they can taste or smell whatever you put in there. The first step is actually making sure that the person is able to taste or smell it. So you do a sensitivity test first, and that sensitivity test is then going to dictate how many times you have to charge that hood. This is a relatively inexpensive method. It's pretty low maintenance, but it is important to know that it is, you're obviously relying on the person. And I actually really do hate to use this term, but I haven't found a better way to say it. But it's subject to cheating, right? So I did over 2,500 qualitative fit tests every year for 7 years when I worked for a hospital. And first off, miserable, but second off, I had a lot of people who, these are nurses, these are doctors, these are hospital workers. There's an altruistic angle there, right? And so they're coming in and they just want to get back to work. So they're coming in, they know the answers, and boom, boom, boom. And I barely ever failed anyone. And another thing is I had relied on my training from the person who brought me in and trained me. And once I read the standard years later, I was not giving a very good qualitative fit test. If you're doing a good qualitative fit test, you should have 4 arms of steel, because you're really charging that hood continuously, and you're making sure that you're creating a really good challenge for the respirator. That's the point, right? So it is slower than the quantitative methods, and it can be quite cumbersome. We actually have some like charts on that, right, where we figured out it can be like up to 200 and something squeezes, and just crazy when we were trying to look at doing a good qualitative fit test, because some new research had come out from the UK actually, where they established that qualitative fit test administrators were sort of doing, this sounds really like they're doing the worst job. That's still a lot of people were doing good tests, but a lot of people weren't. And it's where the most errors were.
It's like minimum was 85.
Yeah, squeezes. Yeah, so it's a lot of squeezes per test. Okay, we wanted to make respirator fit testing as confusing as possible, I think, is what we were going for. So we've got the big overarching umbrella of qualitative versus quantitative. And then when we look at quantitative, we've got 2 methods within that umbrella, and they're CNP and CNC. So really easy to mix them up. But so CNP, that's going to be here at OHD. We've got the OHD QuantiFit. We are the sole manufacturer and patent holder of controlled negative pressure technology. So if you sense any bias as I move through there, then it may be there. But OHD is also now the proud manufacturer of a CNC machine. So CNP, controlled negative pressure, CNC, condensation nuclide counting. And we'll get into what the difference is very basically. The QuantiFit 2 CNP is using air. CNC, the AeroFit, is using aerosol. You're going to adapt the mask in different ways, and they're going to just work in different ways. Controlled negative pressure is measuring air leakage into the respirator, and CNC is measuring the leakage of particles into the respirator. So I mentioned CNP is going to take that direct measurement. The way that this works is you're equipping the respirator with fit test adapters. Those fit test adapters are similar in weight and style for filters that you might use, all pretty much within fractions of ounces. And then the idea is that once you've achieved a controlled negative pressure inside the respirator that's equivalent to, think of a person, so it's the pressure that's created from an inhale, right? And it's that inhale that would be associated with someone working at sort of a low moderate rate. And you can actually like work up from there. But so as we maintain that pressure, we're having to pull out any air that's leaking in. And so we measure that air that we pull out, and that's then therefore equivalent to the air that's leaked in. And we'll get into how we're doing that. So the way that we do that with the respirator is we're sealing it off. So one side is closing off that the mask so that we can create that negative pressure. And then on the other side, we're measuring and we're removing that air to create and maintain. And then that leak rate is what we use to create a fit factor. We're going to put that, and we'll get into that. I don't want to jump too far ahead and end up repeating myself. So the benefits of controlled negative pressure are you can do it anywhere. It's highly portable. It's got battery power, and it doesn't have any environmental requirements. Because you're just using air, you could do this off the the back of a truck, whatever. Take the respirator fit testing to your person as long as you have the appropriate adapters for whatever respirator you're using. Single greatest limitation, and in my opinion, the only real limitation is that it cannot test your disposable respirators. So your filtering face piece, your N95s. What you'll hear competitors or people who don't fully understand how CNP is working is that limitations are that the test subject is holding their breath or that they are remaining still. Just for the record, that's just not how CNP works. CNP is doing the breathing for you, so that's why you're having to do that. And you're remaining still because the way that we're testing the respirator and what was found to be the most effective for controlled negative pressure specifically in research was with having exercises beforehand that then test the ability of the mask to reseat. And so it's just it's a very different technology, and it's a very different way of evaluating the respirator. So this is our most common control negative pressure protocol. It's called the read-on protocol. This is the version that's in OSHA. And I used to never do a test because I just kind of assumed that people had seen a fit test. And now I've found over and over that people want to see a test and that there's, just interest in that. So we're going to walk through a complete read-on fit test. And yes, my good friend and colleague, Booth, is giving our CEO, Luke Allen, a fit test. And it is so pleasing for me to right now have been able to mute him while we, wow. That's for you, Booth. So what's going to happen is that read-on protocol is 5 steps. What you're seeing on the screen now was a circle around the breath indicator circle. So our newest iteration, the QuantiFit 2, is going to be able to actually sense when the subject takes their breath and holds it. And so once Luke, he's got his mask all donned, it's adapted up to control negative pressure, he's going to take a breath. That breath indicator is going to turn green and it's going to automatically initiate the test step. And of course, Luke's done this, a million times. So this is just the face forward step. That's just testing fundamental fit, essentially. Then the second step, Luke is going to bend over. And this is testing that pull of gravity, right? Making sure that with that weight all the way down, that you're still able to get that seal. So once he's bent over, he's again going to take that breath. The machine's going to automatically sense that, know that you've taken your breath and held it, and then it's going to run through that test step. The third step is a little funny if you're not familiar. Luke is gonna shake his head and he's gonna either, forcefully exhale or talk or yell. I've seen people do all different things. The idea is just to break that seal. And so then this step, once you've done that, you're gonna come to a stop and you're gonna initiate the test step. And that's making sure that the mask has the ability to reseat if it were to get, knocked or jostled or after talking. Because when you're really concerned about contaminant getting in is on the inhale, right? We're gonna make sure that it's gonna be able to, when you create that pressure, reseal the mask. So our last 2 steps are why this is called the read-on protocol. So Luke is he just completely remove the mask. He's putting it back on. Once he gets it situated, he's gonna just take that breath, and hopefully you're familiar with it now. He's gonna take that breath, hold it. The machine's gonna automatically recognize that breath hold, and then it's gonna initiate the test step. And then the 5th step is just another read-on, which means in every read-on protocol fit test, you're getting 3 donnings of that respirator. And that's a really important aspect of the test because what you're showing is that user is able to consistently, repeatedly don their respirator. And so that's just another thing that was found that with CNP, right? You don't do that with CNC. You wouldn't be able to because all the particles would get into the respirator each time. But it was just found that with CNP, this was the best way to challenge the respirator. And so, Luke, I'm sure, is going to pass with flying colors. Both these guys, Booth and Luke, are expert fit testers. So he's done with his fit test, and that's a read-on protocol fit test with CNP. So I mentioned this briefly, but this is a big difference between the 2 methods, and it's how you calculate the fit factor. So that number you saw on the screen. So the way that CNP does it is we're taking that breathing rate. So what we've set as that inhalation pressure, we're taking that breathing rate and we're putting it over the actual measured leak rate. So our breathing rates are, actually, I think we might actually get into this a little bit more. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. So our breathing rate is actually expressed in liters per minute, and then we're dividing that by our leak rate, which is just expressed in cubic centimeters per minute. And so we're just going to do that quick conversion. If any of you are certified industrial hygienists or certified safety professionals, you're probably very familiar with that conversion. And if you're not and you want to be a CIH or a CSP, then that one needs to go on your list. So that's just so that we can talk about our breathing rates and our leak rates in an easy way, right? Like we only want to talk about 53,800 cc's per minute for our breathing rate. So it's just a simple conversion. And so if we take, just to make the math easy, we take our our breathing rate that's associated with read-on, and we convert it. So 53.8 liters per minute becomes 53,800 cc's per minute. And somehow we measured just to make the math easy, a 53.8 cc's per minute leak rate, that would give us a 1,000 fit factor for that specific test exercise, which is another important note, which we'll explain a little bit later. So with CNC, condensation nuclei counting, looks like I cut off some of the words there. Oops, no.
We'll fix that.
We'll fix that before we send out the slides. But this is going to measure an ambient particle concentration in a room. It's going to measure outside, and then it's going to measure inside the respirator. And this is a pretty wide range of particles. And the idea is that if you have a high efficiency filter, so you're going to use a P100 filter during CNC fit testing, and because that's a 99.97% effective filter, that any particles you're counting inside the respirator are going to come through a leak source. And so the ratio of that is you're taking the ambient. I'll get to that, Rick, in just a second. So it feels almost like I should have addressed it before the slide, but that's fine. The ratio for this fit factor is going to be the ambient concentration over the in-mask concentration. Okay, going back to CMP briefly with your question, Rick, is the breathing rate set by the instrument during the breathe-in step? So I don't know exactly what you mean with breathe-in step. So the breathing rate is set by the instrument, like that's already preset when you select your protocol. So once you select your protocol, it has the breathing rate based on which protocol you've selected. So our APR mask protocol is a moderate to low breathing rate. If you then, selected the military, you're in the military, that breathing rate is higher because we're assuming that people who are in the military are going to be using their mask under more rigorous conditions. And then we go up to also to SCBA. So that's our firefighters. If you're a firefighter and you're, wearing your SCBA, you're obviously going to be really huffing and puffing as you go to fight a fire. If you've ever seen people, firefighters after a fire, I mean, they're truly worn out. So yes, the breathing rate is set. It's not set during the breathe-in step. Let me know if you need more information there, Rick. Okay. This is just showing a little bit of how, this is not the best diagram of how this is working, but just to get an idea of how CNC is working. So you have where you're taking an ambient sample, and then you set that at the beginning of the test. This is specifically for the fast fit protocols, which is what we're going to show later. So you take an ambient, you set it, then you go into the mask, you perform a few exercises, and that during that time you're taking an in-mask sample. And then at the end of the test, you're going to take another ambient sample. It's going to average those together to give you an average ambient sample to use in the final fit factor calculation. But so these particles are going to go through, they're going to get covered with alcohol, and that's going to grow them, miraculously, it grows them, no matter the size of the particle, it grows them up to be able to pass through a laser and get counted. So cool technology there too. So CNC's greatest benefit is obviously that it can test any tight fitting respirator to include those filtering face piece and disposables. The limitations here are that it does have those environmental requirements, right? You are going to have a room with enough particulate, particularly if you're going to be testing N95s, because when you test something below 99% efficiency, you're going to have to use what's called a DMA. And I don't think I cover that. I'm not sure, maybe I do, but and so that's a more narrow range of particles. And so you're going to need to be, in a room that's a reasonable size, preferably actually with less good ventilation. You kind of want to be able to build up some particles. And then your test subject shouldn't have eaten or smoked for 30 minutes before testing. And that's because you can get actually, person produced particles. These are those fast fit protocols that I just mentioned. So these actually are currently only accepted in OSHA, but I imagine most of you are OSHA folks. And the only difference here, I actually haven't been using this, but the only difference here is this second step. So if you're testing an elastomeric respirator with CNC, then this second step is going to be jogging in place. And if you're testing a filter and face piece respirator with CNC, then you're going to use talking. And that's just because same thing when I talked about CMP, how the research showed, this is how you should challenge the mask. This is the same reason here. When they did research on this, they established that jogging in place was a better challenge for an elastomeric respirator, and that talking was a better challenge for those filtering face piece respirators. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with CMP and actually walk through a CNC test. Now this is specifically for the elastomeric, and you can see my guys here have switched their roles. But so Booth has donned his respirator and Luke is engaging the test. The first step for the CNC protocol for elastomeric, well, for both, is bending over. So during this time, this step is actually a long step. It's about 50 seconds, 50 seconds. Is that right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But it's going to do a 20-second ambient sample, and then it's going to switch to measuring in the mask. It's going to measure in the mask for 30 seconds. And during that test step, the subject is bending over. So again, kind of like testing to make sure that mask isn't pulling away too much from the face. They're going to take 2 breaths at that sort of down extreme, and then they're going to come back up, and now they're testing that sort of fundamental fit, like I mentioned with CMP, and again take 2 breaths. And they're going to do that for that 50-second duration. I'm pretty confident it's the 50 seconds now. So you've got that 20-second ambient, 30-second in mask. Then you move to jogging in place. When you jog in place, for the entire time, the machine's taking an in-mask sample. And so I wonder if this looks like this to them. We're getting it in kind of like a little bit jerky motion. So I apologize if you're seeing that on your end too. But it is kind of, I guess, the sillier step for CNC. And then this is just trying to see if the mask is, jostling at all while he's doing that jog. The third step is going to be head side to side. And the purpose here is to really get to the extreme, right? You're trying to see if when you come over your shoulder, are you maybe, nudging the respirator on this side, or is it maybe pulling away from your face on this side? And then you're taking 2 breaths over that shoulder. And then as you're moving to the other side, you're doing the same thing, sort of testing at that extreme, seeing if there's something that's interfering or if it's just pulling away from your face. And then the last step is going to be the same idea, but looking up and down. And so you're looking up and you're making sure that that's not creating, a gap under the chin or doing something weird with the respirator. And then you're looking down and trying to get to that extreme. Same idea. Make sure you're not doing anything that's going to get that mask off of your face. These steps are all really important to be performed. All fit test steps for any protocol. It's really important for you to be doing the fit test in the gear that you would be wearing when you're wearing your respirator. That's something else to just think about. And so after that test step, the last test step, so it just did 4 steps, each with a 30-second in-mask sample. It then takes another ambient sample at the end, and you'll sort of see a quick adjustment in those fit factors. So the original test step fit factors it shows you will be based on that initial ambient reading. And then once you get that second reading, it's going to average that in and adjust those. Okay, I do talk a little bit about this. So this is what I was mentioning when we talk about the different respirators. Your filtering face piece respirators. Now this is specific to the US, to NIOSH's rating of respirators. A lot of people actually think that the N means NIOSH. It doesn't. So the N is a labeling that means that it's not resistant to oil. And so all of these N, R, and P, that is a rating for its oil resistance. So N, not resistant to oil. R, it has some resistance. And then P, it's oil proof. And then the number, so 95, 99, 100, is going to tell you that filter efficiency. So 95%, 99%, and 100%. That was one thing that was very strange during the pandemic that N95 became so synonymous with respiratory protection that for a while there, you could still go get your hands on P100 respirators when all the N95s were sold out on back order. And that's what any hospital I could go talk to during the pandemic here in Birmingham, I would go say, hey, we'll try to look for P100s because those are actually still available. So I just mentioned this, but this is important because of how CNC works. So when you go under that 99% filter efficiency, you're going to have possibly, up to, from the NIOSH rating, up to 5% of particles that are going to be actually coming through the filter. You don't want to count those as a function of fit, because they're not. So you go to a range of particles where the mask is much closer, like 99% at least, maybe even higher, 99.97 is kind of a number we throw out there for 100% effective. But you go to a range where the filter media is very effective, is above that 99% range, and then that way you're evaluating the seal, not evaluating the filter efficiency, which would not be the purpose of a fit test. It would not be very important to you. So with that CNC fit factor, you're looking at the concentration outside of the mask and you're dividing it by the concentration inside the mask. And that's the concentration of the particles within that range that it's counting. So whether it's the total range that accounts for your elastomeric respirators and your filtering face piece respirators greater than 99% efficient, and then a smaller range, a more narrow range of particles that it's going to count for your less than 99% effective filtering face piece respirators. So same idea with making just the math easy. So if we were to take a concentration of the ambient aerosol, our average concentration throughout the test, so with that first reading and the second reading, we would get 6,000 particles. And then during the test, for that specific test step, we were to measure 6 particles, that would give you a 1,000 fit factor, just to sort of express the difference. Okay, a big sort of confusing aspect with fit testing is that then both of these methods, so CMP and CNC, that measure their fit factors in very different ways based on completely different things, right? They don't line up, they're not the same. They both take those individual fit factors and run them through a formula that's the same. So run them through a harmonic mean to get the overall fit factor. And this is just because a harmonic mean is a really special kind of average that's going to help lessen the impact of really big numbers, and it's going to help increase the impact of small numbers. And this is so that fit factors can be more conservative in their evaluation of fit. So this is an overall fit factor example. So if you were to just take a straight average of those 5 numbers that are listed, then you would get a 1,000. But if you run it through a harmonic mean, the overall fit factor formula, then you're going to get an 862. So you can just see how it's just pulling that average down. It's going to increase the weight of the 2 less numbers, so the 500 and the 750, and it's going to decrease the weight of the higher numbers, so the 1500 and the 1250. Okay, some things that I want to I know that was just a lot of information just getting thrown at you, but one thing that we keep fighting, I guess, in our industry, and I mean this in respiratory protection more broadly, but a lot of groups just really think that doing their fit testing is just checking a box, and they're going to experience a lot of frustration when they get failures. I would like to challenge everyone in this space for what failure really means. I almost hate that we use that word, for what failure means in this context. So anytime that you have a fit test failure and it results in someone changing the size of their respirator, changing the model of their respirator, or being retrained on how to use their respirator, that's a win. That's not a bad thing. That is what fit testing is for. Fit testing is to identify those failure points, to then make the corrective action and improve the safety of your people. This is why we do fit testing. So we're not fit passing. We're not just checking a box. I mean, I'm probably overly passionate about this, but it really is like, what are we even doing if we're not just trying to protect our people and trying to identify, what about like even mask integrity issues? We had a group, I won't name names, but we had a customer of ours who they were implementing this very thorough like cleaning procedure for all of their respirators. So they would come in for the day and be handed their respirator that they had been fit tested on that same, model, size, style. And they would select it from the appropriate bin. They'd go about their day business and they'd turn it in. Well, after that turn in, they were doing this intensive cleaning where they're taking everything apart and then putting it all back together. everything. And it turns out that even though the respirators looked very clean, that this intensive cleaning process was actually damaging certain parts of the respirator. So, and they found this out through the respirator manufacturer after they went to them, when they started having fit test failures. Well, that fit test failure, that identified that problem. That then helped them, change the way, and because they were doing fit testing every year, that meant that this procedure wasn't in place for a full year, and it didn't lead to as many exposures as it might have if it had continued. So yeah, anyway, just to say, we're not fit passing, we're fit testing. There is a reason, and failure is good. Okay, I got a question. Richard is asking, I recently attempted to fit test someone with a 3.5 face who had sinus surgery 6 months ago. She was not able to pass. What kind of fit testing were you doing, Richard?
He's gonna let us know.
Okay, I'm sure you'll let us know. I'm gonna move on to the next slide. Okay, another thing that's just something that is sort of important to me, especially in this like post-COVID world. I actually had a lot of, not a lot, but like several people at AIHA Connect. I did a talk on this at AIHA Connect, and I had at least like 3 people say like, oh, but just don't mention COVID. I'm like, no, okay. COVID happened, and it's actually important to think about what's the next pandemic. So when I think about that, I'm wondering about what can we do to fit test the public? We saw so many people wearing just these, pieces of fabric over their face, and I don't want to get into the mask debate and debacle, but it did make me wonder, like, well, what if we were able to actually supply the public? We had enough to then supply the public with respiratory protection, like actual respirators. So could it help engage a person like we feel like it does with employees in their own protection? Is it something we could have where like clinics or use CVS, you can go and get your fit test? I don't know, it's a dream world. Occupational health clinics could open to the public instead of just being for. There's a lot of liability here, and of course, anything you do with people, there's a risk of abuse. And then you wonder about what does it mean for medical clearance. But I love to mention this to every group I talk to, because someone out there could be sort of the difference in making this a reality. So I think the fit testing for the public is a direction that we could go, but maybe not. This is a little outdated now, and unfortunately, because of the things that have been going on at NIOSH, if you don't know, then Google. But these were some of the goals that NIOSH had for fiscal year 24, and some of them were pretty cool. So there's an idea about having a facial scanning app that was gonna give you some idea if a particular filter and face piece respirator would be able to fit your specific facial structure, or at least be likely to. And then they were crowdsourcing to try to identify new respirator fit test methods. And another big thing was actually looking at these sort of counterfeit filters, which I think is on the next slide, but a lot of stuff that I guess has probably been a little bit derailed with some of the changes that have been going on with NIOSH, but there's a lot of research, there's a lot of need. We still have just millions and millions of people who are wearing respiratory protection to protect themselves from hazards that they are facing every day on their job. And so it's really important to drive these things forward and see if there is innovation that can happen. Because honestly, over my career, so now of 20-something years, there's been what I would call a pretty low level of innovation by comparison, right? Like within my lifetime, think of what you've seen with other technologies, and it just feels like respiratory protection is a little bit behind the curve. Okay, that's my little rant there. Okay, this is a fun little game for everyone. Okay, so react with a thumbs up if you think that the filter on the left is a counterfeit filter. So we recently, I say recently, but so because we now offer a CNC machine, we obviously had a lot of interest in having P100 filters. Okay, now indicate same way, thumbs up if you think that the filter on the right is a counterfeit filter. So we had to, in order to do all of our quality testing for our AeroFit, invest in a lot of filters. And we found, we found out the hard way, that both of these are counterfeit. So sorry, trick question.
Trick question.
Trick question. They're both counterfeit. So please do be careful out there. Now, one thing I will tell you is if we had, or if I personally had paid closer attention to when we were sourcing the filters, what our money guy was paying for them, I would have known that they were counterfeit, because he was getting for like, I can't remember what it was, like 60 cents a piece, which is outrageous. You're not gonna get a good filter for 60 cents a piece, just know that. But I wasn't doing that, and we're a respirator fit testing company, right? So if we can get duped, then I think really anyone can.
Yeah.
And so just do pay attention to that, and that was something that Nash was doing some research on, that I hope will get picked back up. I think they did release some stuff on some counterfeit canisters. But just know that like going on Amazon and searching for a P100 filter, it's just not gonna, it's not gonna help you. You know, I guess go to the source or go to a legitimate vendor, so that you make sure you're getting the right filters. Okay. Perfect.
We're getting some Q&A or questions coming in. Please submit them in the chat. Richard Wyant, please, follow up with us on what type of fit testing you were doing. And Stephanie's gonna answer these.
Yes, okay. One from Anne. I encountered counterfeit N95s during 2020. I found there was problem, during fit testings. That's how we found out. Doing the fit testing with the AeroFit and going, there's, knowing that the system is solid because we've just run it through the paces, and then like knowing our environment's fine and going, why are we getting, it's through the filter. Okay, so Tom, how to tell if they're counterfeit? I would contend, I mean, there are markings that you can look at, but in my opinion, these, based on what I know about the markings that you're required to have, these met those requirements. I mean, maybe I'm missing something subtle. So it's not, obviously they can just replicate the markings.
So how did you find out? Like
This was through fit testing.
Oh,
we were getting leakage that we knew shouldn't exist, ultimately, sealing the respirator in a different way, ensuring that it was airtight, and then knowing that it was getting particles through the filter. The same way that I think it was Anne figured out that the N95s were filled, which, oh my gosh, bless you, because that must have been miserable. Because when I do N95 testing, it's already kind of hit or miss for, anyway, I digress.
Any other questions? Please feel free to drop them in the chat.
Okay, so your loose fitting PAPRs, I mean, I have no problem with that. Like the loose fitting PAPRs have a lower assigned protection factor, so there's only certain things that you can use them against. I think it's I think it might be a 25. And so depending on the contaminant of concern, you might not be able to find a loose fitting PAPR, but the ones that are designed, and if it's that was the link.
Yeah, I'm saying.
So I can't remember where I was, but hopefully I just answered that. So yeah, the ones that are designed, if you're using it in the appropriate environment and that assigned protection factor of 25 is enough for your environment, then yes, I think they're great. Now they can be expensive. Okay, expiration dates. Are you saying, Donna, that like that's how you can tell, or that's the thing that might be required on the filter? Oh, this one. Can you use the mask after the expiration date? Oh, well, that's a good question. I mean, during COVID, they did do like an extension for the like N95 respirators that we were having short supply of, and then they also allowed for some reuse there. I would say that in a normal circumstance, no, like don't use a respirator beyond its expiration date. Obviously there are emergency situations where something's gonna be better than nothing, but for most applications, I would say no, do not use a respirator past its expiration date. And there are things, I don't know if this is true, actually, I need to check this for respirators, but one important thing to make sure every time you're inspecting your respirator is that those straps still have that tension and that your straps are still good. I didn't realize with my hard hat and I know a hard hat is not, very much like a respirator, but I didn't realize that my hard hat had a different expiration date for the shell than for the harness that was on my head. So I'm not sure if there's like, because I know with some of my respirators, my favorite one, like the G1, I could theoretically change out the straps. So I wonder if the straps actually have a different expiration date than the mask itself. I would like to check that and see, because I have had to replace my straps and I don't recall replacing my face piece.
That's a good question. If you have access to the Q&A, which everyone should, you should see in there a question from Domingo, and I have added the link there. You can also see the CEU sign up from Emily Mahamar, our favorite marketing coordinator.
Wait, don't we have two?
Well, she's technically an intern right now. Soon we'll have two favorite marketing coordinators.
Wow.
Please use that form to sign up. If for some reason you can't, you can always email me at lflowers@ohdglobal.com.
We should really put the email addresses up on the side.
Yeah, we're gonna do that
We're gonna do it
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
We thought about, we hope that you will use the form today. But that is that, please do join us tomorrow if you're available for our air sampling webinar. We're really excited about that. So we'll be back here and just keep enjoying your lunches with us.
Yes, thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate the questions, and thank you for your time.
Thanks.